It's always the competition of who gets to be the center of attention. So, hello, everyone. Welcome. And we are back with Jackie Clark, PADS's breeding and puppy program manager, and also Pad Sawyer, who, though she is still tiny, is getting much bigger. So, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tara Doherty, PADS's Director of Communications. So today we are in our next installment of Sawyer's Adventure. So Sawyer came to us as an import dog, and all the way from Australia. And she's being puppy raised by Jackie, which gives us the unique privilege of kind of following her journey in kind of a tangible way. So we are officially entering teenagehood. So that's what we're going to dive into today. And Jackie's taken a deep breath. But for those of you that haven't joined us before on Tune In Tuesday, here's how it works. You are welcome to ask questions. If you're following us on Zoom and watching on Zoom today, you can either click the chat button or the Q&A button and ask your questions there. If you're following us on Facebook Live, you can type your questions in the comments, but either way, tell us where you are watching from. We would like to know kind of where our viewers are kind of joining us from. So with that, Jackie, over to you. Tell us a little bit about where Sawyer is at right now that requires many deep cleansing breaths.
Well, to be fair, I'm going to say I have a house full of teenage kids, and so it is a cumulative load. It's not just Sawyer, but indeed Sawyer is just about to hit 10 months next week, and so we're kind of passing from the juvenile period into the adolescent period, and the adolescent period tends to be categorized by the same type of behaviors that we would observe in human teenagers. So our listening ears don't tend to work particularly well, and we engage in riskier behavior. We engage in more pro-social behavior, and it's one of those times that even though we think they should know better because we've put in months and months of training, often they demonstrate that they don't know better because this prefrontal cortex part of the brain is still developing. So that is kind of, yeah, you're absolutely bored and I'm lying about the whole thing. So that's kind of where we find ourselves right now. So, some of the things that we see, and it's waxing and waning, but we were doing Zoom puppy class a couple weeks ago, and, Sawyer just kind of was standing with her head on my lap, and I was sitting, and the lights were on and no one was home. I was cueing her to do behaviors, and it was just these blinks that nothing was going in. And so even though her body isn't growing a lot, her brain is growing a lot, and there's only a certain amount of power to fuel the ship. And so if those resources are going towards brain growth, they aren't really going towards anything else right now.
She's like, big stretches.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me what at this stage you're working on with her in terms of either training or behavior, or just kind of what are you doing at this point in time, this kind of developmental period towards kind of getting her across that finish line? What does that look like for this stage?
So at this stage, I'm looking at setting her up so that we maintain our relationship, even if she's not performing where I want her to. We tend to want progress to be linear. And there's this great meme out there of I thought my dog training would be like this, and it's filled with, pits and crevasses full of water and setbacks. Yeah. And so the most important thing in adolescence is to preserve the relationship. And so we get things like this where I've told her down, she's decided she wants to be up. And what our tendency to do is to go, okay, I'm going to reach for a treat, then to help myself out. But what that actually does is we get into a different cycle where I start bribing her instead of rewarding her. And so I'm really trying to avoid, reaching for that treat to help me out. So Sawyer. you're going to just present yourself in fine teenage form, eh? Sawyer, okay, pop, pop, down.
She's like, you
Yes.
asked for a teenage demonstration.
Yeah.
So,
So I will reinforce when she's done what I've asked her to, but I'm not going to reach for my bribes and bribe her to do it. It is a slippery slope, and the things that they learn in adolescence can stay with them for the rest of their lives. So it's not a habit that I want to get into, and expectation I want her to develop. So instead, I'm still focusing on reinforcing good behaviors, and I am focusing on preserving a good relationship with her. But I'm also making decisions about things that are not going to grow her in the way I want. So, for instance, I know that her recall right now has gone from 100% to probably about 30%. I know, I'm telling them all your secrets. So I am not going to set her up into a situation where we're going to get into a habit of I call her and she refuses to acknowledge me. I call her, she refuses to acknowledge me. I call her, she refuses to acknowledge me. So that may mean that we limit our off-leash outings because she's not practicing behaviors that I want. It may mean that when I put her out in the backyard to go to the bathroom, that instead of calling her, I actually go out and she kind of comes over to me happily, and I bring her back in with me and reinforce her for that. But I'm not really setting up those situations for us to butt heads, because that is where our relationship's going to suffer. And then, she is going to kind of carry on into adulthood with kind of a bit of that bullheadedness. So instead, we're trying to set her up, thank you, to succeed. And so along with that, there's some skills that we're building in that are going to help her. So if you notice right now, she's giving a perfect demo. She is shifting a lot on her bed. She is starting to vocalize at me. She is yawning. We're going to get some arm biting. We're going to show our butt to the camera, which is super rude. And so instead of, if I was in a training session with her, I would tend to not let her go that far down that path. But since we are doing it for the camera, we're going to let her go a little bit farther. But some of the training that we're working on to deal with this is teaching her instead that being settled is actually where she's going to get her value. Yes. So we've been working on a lot in all of our puppy classes with our puppies, starting to learn a leash guide to put their chin down. So she is getting there. Yes. Where we're building up to the point where that's actually going to mean there's no reinforcement available and we just want her to settle down. Yes, but she's still at the point where she is learning. So I am reinforcing her for it. But good. We're starting to build that this still behavior with your head down is what actually is going to get reinforced, rather than kind of all of that behavior that's designed to get me to engage with her. And, kind of true to teenagers, even if I engage with her in a way that is not super positive, it's better than being ignored. So instead, we want to teach her that these still behaviors, yes, are what is going to get reinforced instead of the squirmy, bitey, jumpy, barky behaviors.
and I love that she just several times she's kind of lifted her head like, hey, is this the thing? But on this one now, instead of it kind of being that waiting right after you gave her the treat, she's like, I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to go back to that, my head being down. And I think the other thing, and hopefully the captions are not over her face on both platforms, but they are kind of on the Zoom side right now. But is just that seeing her kind of the little Plinko chips are kind of falling into place, and you can see her going, oh, okay, I know what the right thing is. I think too, I'm going to interrupt just to say, if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A if you're on Zoom, or in the comment section on Facebook Live if you're watching on Facebook Live, and we'll try and answer them. But I think the other thing too is, we've both been at PADS for a long time, and we used to have very, very chill dogs. And I think a lot of people assume that all PADS dogs are very chill. And instead, a lot of what Jackie's demonstrating here is actually us teaching our dogs that have some get up and go to learn to be chill, so that they have that ability to kind of shut off when they need to be shut off, but still have that underlying oomph that will have them performing skills for our clients for years to come. So as most people know, puppies have more energy than adult dogs. So we do want a dog that has a decent level of energy as an adult, because they're going to be going everywhere with their people and needing to work and perform skills throughout the day. So we do want them to have some level of enthusiasm and work ethic and all that good stuff, but also that ability to just shut off their sweet brains when it's time for their partner to work or have lunch with a friend or present at a conference or sit through a meeting, etc., without being a little jack in the box underneath the table. So at this stage of training, I know this is the question we get asked in public, so I'm going to put you on the spot. If with Sawyer, what kind of traits do you see in her? I know as we look at our dogs, we look at, what are kind of some of the career paths they could or might want to take based on their unique personality. What do you see in Sawyer?
She's pretty adaptable. And so, the things that concern me most at this age are, you saw kind of the shuffling and stuff. I'm not super concerned about that. I've seen a lot of dogs go through that. It is hard as a razor. And I want to just go on the record and say, it's okay if you don't like your dog sometimes, because there are times when you're like, oh, this is not the most enjoyable phase for me. And usually that means, she's also struggling. But, she has a lot of really good traits. So she's the dog that's going to come and quietly lay her head in your lap and just delight in just having her head touched and stay there as long as you want her to. She's very, very confident. If something kind of startles her a little bit, she's really easy to reassure and just say, that's nice. And nice is something that she's learned, which means there's a good outcome coming. And so she goes, okay, never mind, that's nice, I like it. So good and confident in public. She tends to settle well in restaurants and stuff where she knows that there isn't the opportunity for interaction, but places where we're moving around tends to still be a bit more of a problem. So, I'm seeing lots, and I wouldn't say that I'm seeing anything that says to me specifically, like, this is the career path for her. And that's a good thing. Like, really what we're trying to aim for is dogs who could do kind of several of our different career paths. And then we have the opportunity when they get a bit older to determine what really lights them up. Oh, thank you. And so, there's nothing at this point that I would say, oh my goodness, this dog is 100% PTSD service dog, or this dog is 100% mobility, or this dog is 100% hearing dog or AFD. But just, she has nice traits that are kind of apparent that, just like my kids, it could go any which way. And we hope that the nice traits win out. Hey, I know your treats are over there. You're going to be over here. And I think it's so funny that every one of these ones that we've done with Sawyer, I think most of what we've worked on is how to be calm, because as you mentioned, Tara, our dogs do need some get up and go. And people tend to think, we need to train them to do a lot of things. Actually, for Sawyer, aside from the confidence and stuff that we've been working on since the get-go, her being able to move through different levels of arousal. So to be able to be calm, to be able to be at like 20% if the situation warrants, 70% if the situation warrants, then back down to 30% intensity is something that's going to be really important, whichever one of our career paths she takes. So I think it's really funny that, this is probably what we spend most of our time on, is just how do we achieve calm, and then how do we move, if I then say, Sawyer, chin. Yes. How do we move into something that's a little bit more active? Sit. Oh, I've got to shoot. Sorry. Sawyer, sit. Good. Bed. Sawyer, bed. Thank you. So how do we move through those different levels as opposed to, just can you do your cues in a fast fire way? Good.
So we do have one question, Jackie, and that is, and I know this is always a common one. How do we teach our dogs, our service dogs, not to bark and to be these quiet creatures that we have? And I know we have 14 minutes left and that's not enough time, but
no, I was just joking with a colleague about this, about, it's one of those things that, so many of the questions, it's complicated. So it really depends on, barking tends to be a symptom rather than the root cause of the behavior. So why is the dog barking? And sometimes the dog is barking for different reasons. So it may be that they see something out the window, they bark to let us know it's there. They hear a noise that they're uncertain of, they bark in that situation. They get excited, they bark in that situation. And so it's more of a case of general reactivity. Or it could be specifically the dog barks when it's scared, or it could be specifically that the dog barks when it's frustrated. And so, part of what we're looking at with our puppies is tearing apart what is the reason that they're barking, and then kind of how do we address whatever that underlying struggle is. So for Sawyer, if she is barking, it is that she's frustrated. If you can hear the upset cow noises in the background, Nav is currently in a kennel and she is definitely vocalizing because she is frustrated. And so part of it is teaching them when there is reinforcement available, and then also teaching them when reinforcement isn't available, so that there's some clarity there, which reduces frustration, and then building in this calmness. So for instance, Sawyer used to be super barky in the kennel. And so we did a lot of training about the kennel being a good place, but we also did some training that said, if I put a sheet over top of the kennel, there is no opportunity for reinforcement. We are not playing kennel games. And so she's at the point now where if you cover her kennel, she just goes to sleep because she knows what to expect. So the frustration doesn't come up. If she was barking because she was scared or worried, then we would look at kind of how do we increase her general optimism and confidence in different situations. And so, we wouldn't focus primarily on, let's say she's barking specifically, traffic wouldn't be a common one, but let's say the traffic, we wouldn't be like, well, we're going to take her around lots of traffic and work her, because potentially we can push her a bit too far. And so instead we'd be like, oh, look, somebody walked outside. That's a good thing. We're going to reinforce that. Oh, look, there's a pile of cardboard boxes. We're going to put some food in that and you can rustle around in it. And just generally look at her saying, if something is happening in the world that isn't what I'm expecting, chances are that's a good thing. So, it really is kind of picking apart what is the struggle that's leading to the barking.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things too, that I always find interesting. Obviously I've had many PADS dogs through my house. And I think one of the things that surprised me most when I became a PADS volunteer was learning that some dogs don't bark at things like the doorbell or people coming to the door, or things like that. And or they don't bark at unseen noises. I always just assumed that that was a dog thing, that they all barked at those sorts of things. So I think there is also, there's certainly the side where we unravel and untease why a dog is barking if they are vocal. But I also know that, we are focusing on breeding dogs with high confidence and resilience, and low kind of reactivity and suspicion. Like we're really, and Jackie in particular, striving towards kind of those goals in terms of breeding dogs that aren't super worried about things in their environment. Now, certainly that is a journey, and we get a very wide spectrum of dogs. And I think the interesting thing, because we touched on this at the beginning, is we're also breeding dogs for more oomph, and often with more oomph comes more enthusiasm. And more kind of vocalness at times. So it's always a balance of breeding for the traits that you want, which sometimes can be counterproductive to other traits that you don't want. So it is always that combination of Jackie's hard work on the nature side, and then also the hard work of our puppy raisers and our puppy program and our advanced trainers on the nurture side of kind of helping diminish those behaviors that are less desirable, and just generally kind of increasing the confidence and the good behavior of the dog. So certainly we do not want our dogs barking in public, but if you see one of these guys out in a yellow vest, it's not absolutely unheard of that a dog will bark. And it's part of their journey to learning to be an assistance dog with their client. So hang on just one sec. So one more question. What about if they are a hearing dog? Do they bark to alert their person? And no, they don't, because their person is deaf. And so barking to alert them to a noise wouldn't help. And so what they would do in that case is they would alert in a physical way. And so typically with our bigger Labradors, we've taught them to kind of boop their people with their nose. When we used to train smaller dogs, they would jump up and have an alert with their front paws, where they would put their paws on the person's leg. And then depending on whether or not it is an emergency noise or a general noise like a telephone or a doorbell, a general noise, they will lead them to the source of the sound. An emergency noise like a smoke alarm, fire alarm, things like that, carbon monoxide detector, all those kinds of noises, they will do a different kind of alert where they say there's a noise, and then typically they will lie flat down to kind of say, hey, it's an emergency noise, to give that individual that's deaf, hard of hearing a visual cue that there's an important noise in the environment, but they don't obviously want to lead the person, for example, into a fire. If, say, for example, a smoke alarm's going off in the hallway, the person's in their bedroom, we want the dog to alert the person and let them know that don't leave the room. There's something to be concerned about. So, or at least proceed with caution. So, and those kinds of skills, just as a side note, while we're talking about hearing dogs, is those skills have to be practiced and rehearsed on a regular basis throughout the dog's life. Obviously, as most people know, smoke alarms don't go off very often. And so those are the kinds of noises that our hearing dog clients have to continually practice and reinforce for the dogs so that they perform reliably when that type of emergency sound happens. So with that, I am just looking to see if there's any more questions that have come up. We've got a lot of people on, and a lot of, unfortunately, it mixes in all the people joining to watch with the questions. So just bear with me as I scroll through. So we've got a couple minutes left. If there's any kind of follow-up questions on anything we've talked about today, feel free to post them in the comment section, or you can also type them into the Q&A if you're watching on Facebook or on Zoom.
I think something we could cover, Tara, is kind of one of the big things about adolescence is sexual maturity. And so just covering off that, for our dogs, like she will at some point, who knows when, at some point she'll go through a heat cycle. Our male dogs also are intact through adolescence. It's kind of a departure from the way things used to be done. Navigator in like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and even the dogs that we know right off the bat aren't going to be bred, we'd like them to go through sexual maturity because hormones don't just play a part in reproduction. They play a part in growth. They play a part in the closure of growth plates. And so if we allow a dog to have their hormones until maturity, all of their growth plates close at the same time. And so we're likely to get orthopedic problems. We're less likely to get some really deadly forms of cancer. And so with almost no exceptions, our dogs are going to stay intact until they're at least a year old. And so, yes, especially between next time we see you. And now Sawyer will have her first heat cycle, which will mean that we will have a month of very few outings and lots of at-home training time.
Yep. And I think it is one of those things where science isn't necessarily changing, but of course it's informing and developing in ways where, it used to be quite common to do pediatric spays on dogs or puppies. And it's certainly something we tend to hold off on, as Jackie said, even in our dogs that we don't plan to use for breeding, because we want those dogs to have really nice, fully developed structure and all those good things, and also kind of guard against other diseases, et cetera, that are affected by those reproductive hormones and development, et cetera. So, and I know anybody who has raised an adolescent dog, there's just like a whole slew of things that come along with that, in terms of, what happens as they go through heat cycles, et cetera. And Jackie, do you want to talk about that just a little bit? Because I think that's something too that behaviorally we see interesting things in both males and females kind of through adolescence.
We do. And the funny thing is, kind of with all of those of us of a certain age, with our prior knowledge, we think like, oh, if we just spay or neuter them, then temperament problems and stuff that we see in adolescence are going to go away. But the fact of the matter is, the hormonal development is just a piece of the picture, right? There's also that brain development and stuff that's happening. And so, just doing a spay or neuter doesn't make the prefrontal cortex grow any more quickly. And the hormonal side of things, we used to think, girls get heat brain before they go into season, and we see a decrease in listening and that sort of thing. And then we started talking to our breeder caretakers about it, who have our mature girls, and they're like, we actually don't see that with our girls. And so it's an adolescent thing. The males kind of get this blank stare where nothing's going on. And you can tell that they are exhausted and they're really growing. And again, mounting behavior, both for males and females, is super common during adolescence. And the most recent research that came out, which I think is within the past 6 or 8 months, has suggested that if dogs are neutered earlier, that their mounting behavior tends to persist into adulthood, whereas dogs who are intact, their mounting behavior tends to go away as they reach adulthood. And it tends to be more of a symptom of them being in a state of, like when I say over arousal, not sexual arousal, just like overexcitement, overstimulation. And so, if we allow them to be in situations where they practice that behavior, we may see it stick on through adulthood. But, I'm a big fan of, even if dogs were really great at the dog park prior to adolescence, it might not be a great choice for them during adolescence if they're practicing really overexcited, overstimulated behaviors. And, kind of things do even out as we cruise into adulthood. And for anyone who's going through adolescent, in my experience, 10 months tends to be the worst of it. And by 12 months, we're seeing a big improvement. By 14 months, people report that they're kind of most of the way through it. And that's why we do a walk and talk with most of our puppies in training at 10 months, is it gives us a chance to see them in public. And it gives us a chance to give puppy raisers some extra support during a bit of a challenging time.
Yeah. Well, as always, Jackie, you are a fount of knowledge in terms of all the things. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm just double checking to see I haven't missed any questions, but I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I also wanted to highlight, in a couple of weeks, so on April 23rd, we're going to be live streaming our annual graduation. So it's our 2022 grad, celebrating all of our graduates that completed training and were matched with our clients. up until December 31st of last year. So we're really excited about that. And you can tune into that right live on our Facebook Live. And we'll be sending out an email as well this week to kind of all of our supporters, people that are signed up to our e-newsletter. So if you want to get information about that, make sure that you are signed up. And we will also probably provide a Zoom link for that as well that you can access if you don't use Facebook. And to sign up for that, just go to our website at pads.ca. And if you wait about 10 seconds or so, a little pop-up will show up and you can enter your name and email address to sign up there. And we will get that info out this week. So we're super excited to celebrate. Jackie, thank you again for being with us today. And Sawyer, she is definitely maturing and growing into a lovely lady. And we will catch up with you probably in another couple of months and see where she's at that point. So for those of you that maybe you're seeing Sawyer for the first time, if you go to our website, pads.ca/tune-in-Tuesday, you can see kind of past episodes of the adventures of Sawyer and see some of the past kind of broadcasts that we've done with her since she was just a wee little baby and arrived here with us and kind of following her development. So thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you all soon.